All right, I think I know most of the people in the room and many of you that are online, but my name is Adam Derringer. Wear multiple hats. I guess the primary one is I run the project management team at Ayers and Associates. We help run the imagery and LiDAR program for the state of Wisconsin. And then I generally work in the Midwest in general. I'm also the GIS administrator for the company. I came to Ayers in order to play with big data and help people get that big data. And that step 2 is using big data. It's very challenging, and a lot of municipalities, counties, small companies just don't have the horsepower to do some of the analytical pieces of how you want to collect big imagery or LiDAR data sets. So past all that. So those of you not familiar,
online up there.
those of you not familiar with LiDAR data, it stands for light detection and ranging. I know the schedule says we're talking about LiDAR imagery. That's not quite accurate. They're two very different technologies. One is a laser system, and one is it's a camera, digital camera. Essentially, what we do for the statewide data that we're talking about today is we've got about a $2.4 million sensor that flies generally from an aircraft, but it can be done from UAS and other platforms as well. But today we're talking about fixed wing aircraft. It fires anywhere from 800,000 to 1.2 million points per second as it flies over the surface of the Earth. And then depending on that shot rate and then the height of the plane, you get, say, 2 points per meter of LiDAR readings on the ground. That gives you elevation points, or you can get 500 points of points on the ground. Al actually asked me about a project like that for a shoreline project last year. So just collecting data to your purpose. For these countywide projects, the number one thing that this data is being used for really is still floodplain and hazard mapping. But as the data is getting better, the software is getting better, drainage analysis, feature extraction, vegetation analysis, there's tons and tons of ways to utilize that data. Not sharing the screen. Share screen. Sure. Oh. Hey, all right. So I'm going to skip past most of the LiDAR stuff because I want to really look at LiDAR data in Wisconsin. So LiDAR data has been collected in Wisconsin since 2002. Everybody's got LiDAR data. Some people are collecting LiDAR data for the 4th time at this point. We collected LiDAR data in cooperation with DNR up until about 2015. Then a program called the 3DEP program got funded for grant funding at the end of 2015. Bayfield County, where we are today, was one of the first grant winners for that LiDAR data. A big key to that was matching federal standards. So just before these grants were announced, FEMA, USGS, NRCS, Army Corps of Engineers all finally agreed upon what LiDAR specifications should be. One of the very first things that happened to me when I came to Ayers is I contracted Ashland County's LiDAR data. We were about ready to fly it, and then we found out FEMA was going to fly Ashland County in the very same spring, and nobody bothered to talk to one another. So we're trying to fix that problem, right? That's one of my jobs. So at this point, we have collected the entire state of Wisconsin to standards that match the 3DEP program. So what that means is USGS will utilize it, FEMA can utilize it for their firm maps, for updating the floodplain maps that a lot of counties need. I work with counties and other agencies to help get a match grant made for that, coming from the local agencies. And then I work very, very closely with Department of Administration, Jim Giorano, in order to pull in other federal dollars in order to help get the other half of those grants or more funded for the county programs. As we're in northern Wisconsin, this is some of the newest LiDAR data being collected. Polk County, Burnett County, Bayfield County all just flew in 2022. That data could be approved any given day, but I'm not going to speak on the part of the USGS. They're still really far behind after COVID. So we're hoping by the end of the year, those projects will all be approved. And we're starting to see data that's being collected at a higher standard than the minimum standard for federal, which is 2 point per meter data. Vertical standard on that is 0.3 feet vertical accuracy on hard surfaces. What Bayfield collected was actually 8 point per meter data across the entirety of the county. So great data sets, and we're starting to see more and more of that 8 point per meter. In the Milwaukee area, we're really looking at 30 point per meter as we want to look above the ground in 3D buildings. It's a lot. This kind of gives you an idea of that status of where that data is. Ashland County got their last data in 2019. So Bayfield is actually one of the first, it is the first county, that in Manitowoc, that got that first grant awarded. Worked on that with coastal management. Anna has since retired, but she and I wrote that grant. Ashland County was flown in 14 by FEMA, as I previously stated. We had floods in 16 and 18 up here that most of you know. That kind of gave priority back to northern Wisconsin to refly so we could analyze change. What happened? Why did so many things wash out? Give you an idea of what Ashland County's data would have been before 1 square mile of LiDAR data. And if we're talking about getting points, measurable points on the ground, X, Y, Z, LiDAR is first and foremost an elevation data set. We're getting about 709,000 points on the ground per square mile. Got a lot of surveyors that work for me. They're all worried that they're going to lose their jobs to this. They won't. Their stuff is still more accurate. But in the case of wide area mapping, really great stuff. That's 1 point per meter. That's pretty much everything 2015 and before. If we move to 2 point per meter, so like Bayfield and Ashland's next project, we were moving that 700,000 points to about 4.5 million points on the ground. And we're starting to measure things above the ground. As we look to Bayfield County's next project, it went from 2 point per meter to 8 point per meter. So that 4.5 million number just goes up and up and up. And then we get to start talking about data storage and people talking about processing in the cloud from the previous conversations, which is also problematic. All right, so here's all sorts of data that gets created from LiDAR data. It can also be aided with imagery data, obviously another part of my job, but it's a huge amount of foundational data comes from LiDAR data. Some of this could be, this is just outside of Hayward. I'm not sure if we're going to see wagon trails in this, but if we look at kind of the western side of the screen, we've got a typical road with some offshoots. We've got another road that's kind of a dirt road that's going just a little bit west onto this peninsula coming out. The next road that you see kind of down the center of this peninsula, if you look closely, you kind of see the ruts. I think it's a 4-wheel drive track. It's not the wagon train coming through and exploring northern Wisconsin. However, if we jump over one more track, that is, I think, part of the Birkebeiner ski trail. So we can start underneath a forest canopy to see trails, like small trails. And that starts coming into play for counties to be able to map things for economic development, bringing in tourism, or certainly for safety. So if somebody falls down, breaks a leg, they now have a very accurate trail map. I like showing this, and this will be my last non-live slide. This is down in Calumet County. I've got a geology background. If you look at the drumlin, you can, the glaciers moved from kind of the northeast to southwest in this particular case and created this hill. But if you look on the north point of that, you see these straight north-south striations on that hill. So this is a vegetated hill with trees on it. So we're looking through the trees, we're looking through the vegetation, and I'm looking at the surface of the earth, and I can see what looks like the glacier came back and had a second push along the side of that hill. And on the bottom side, you can see the moraine. So you get these extra glacial striations that came across the drumlin and then stopped just on the south side of the hill. I think it's a fascinating image. Very, very cool stuff. And this is just 2 point per meter data, right? And Ashland and Bayfield, 8 point per meter data. Pretty amazing. All right, I'm going to jump over, try to appropriately share my screen, and show data. Everybody can see that? All right, so we're looking at Calumet County. This is just kind of a R&D county for me. I show it a lot because I play with the data a lot. It's easy to process 300 square miles versus 1,500 square miles of LiDAR data. So everybody that did a USGS project has the point data. They should also have DEM data, and this is three-dimensional data. So things that you can enable in your offices is being able to measure from these data sets. Open the Wi-Fi. Works from here. Maybe. It's working. So we've got this nice escarpment right along Lake Winnebago that is completely covered. But again, the LiDAR data can see right through that. Wi-Fi is struggling for me, but that's okay. Get other opportunities to showcase it. We can get into a municipal area and we can see our contours that we're creating from LiDAR data. A lot of people's original contours were 2-foot contours off of subpar LiDAR data, or in worst case scenarios, many people still have like DLGs with 20-foot contours. But these are all a 3D space that you can have LiDAR data, you can measure your buildings, you can do all sorts of neat stuff with this data. I can look at various facilities or farms. You have another shot at measuring tools. Just not going to cooperate for me.
This is that 30 point.
This is 2-point per meter data. So again, this data right here for like Bayfield County, it's going to be 4 times as dense as this for their data. In like a Milwaukee County, you're going to be looking times as much data. Right. So like, I'm actually going to shut that down. I'm going to reload that page. Except, go back to that same tab I created for you guys. Yeah, that works better. So if I've got an ordnance situation in my office, I can sit there and say, what's my setback from my building? I know this happens. I'm just south of Columbia County, in which case I could extend my garage, but I live in Dane County. I have a 60-foot setback. I cannot extend my garage. I could, like, it'd be like 4 feet that I can extend my garage. It's not worth it. But anyway, you can solve a lot of problems real quick with data like this. It's not just that you can do that with your LiDAR data, but if you can enable tools that other people in your offices utilize this data, you can cut profiles on your data. Right, so now I can utilize the surface and see what's the crown of my road, how deep are my ditches. I think Scott mentioned earlier looking at ditches and do they need to be taken care of? Do they need to be maintained? You can do that anywhere you want across your entire county landscape off of a product like this. And this is just essentially what's going to come out of the box. The USGS doesn't classify buildings, it doesn't classify trees, but in the state of Wisconsin, most counties have classified LiDAR data. And in this case, we've also colorized the LiDAR data, so it gives a novice user in GIS a more natural feel for where they are on the Earth. But you can analyze this data. We were working with Door County with their LiDAR data. They have a lot of water quality issues. The entire peninsula is all limestone. Agriculture, they end up with water quality issues all over the place. Their conservation office is about 3.5 people. They get an extra half person kind of in the summertime for projects, and they go out looking for sinkholes. To do that, they pick X number of 40s on any given summer, and they walk through 40s and they look for exposed bedrock and decide if it's a sinkhole. We decided to try to help them out with that because farmers don't like it much when random people go walking through their fields. So with that, we thought we could create closed depressions. And closed depressions are these natural bowls on the surface of the earth that that would, in theory, collect water. We're not looking at soil type or anything like that, but what we are looking at is culverts, and then these bowls on the surface of the earth that things would collect. So in counties that we're doing this work for, we've collected culverts. The second time culverts came up today. Might as well show you kind of the extent that our culverts are going into. So for us to do hydrologic studies, we don't just want to collect US highways, state highways, county highways. We want to collect town roads, residential roads, even driveway culverts. Water, if you don't know where your driveway culverts are, water's going to flow. It's going to hit a driveway culvert and it's going to act like a digital dam the same way it would on a state highway. And water's going to back up. And in your models, it's going to flood a lot of people's backyards that have a ditch and culvert system that wouldn't otherwise flood. So it's important to understand where every single culvert is. Howard was talking about utilizing the DOT has a nice culvert data set. Other people have built nice culvert data sets. They're looking at 280,000 culverts. This is Calumet County. It's like the second smallest county in the state. I mapped 19,000 culverts in Calumet County. Okay, so we'll go back to looking at these closed depressions. If there's a culvert, it drains. It shouldn't be a closed depression unless there's water draining to the closed depression. But once I know where these features are, I can find where's that top point in that closed depression where water would fill up and then drain off to somewhere. Once I've got that, I can start to understand where's the lowest point. In this case, it's right here. So I've got an acreage, which is 3.3 acres right here. Our deepest point is 7.4 feet deeper than the edge. Wouldn't build a structure right here. You're going to have a wet basement. So this is really important for a zoning office in a county or municipality to understand that type of data. And I was talking about sinkholes. So I created this slide for that purpose. I can bring up my imagery. I turn off that closed depression polygon, that light spot that you see right there. That's exposed bedrock. County went out and confirmed that is a sinkhole. So a great way to be able to, I can't tell you from this laser in imagery that there is a sinkhole, but what I can do is most sinkholes exist in a closed depression. So it allows that conservation office with limited staff to target the closed depressions when they're going out into the field and utilize their time a little better. LiDAR data today, it's classified, it can collect more points. So in this case, you have closed depressions. They exist naturally on the surface of the earth. We're humans, we like to cut down trees. So luckily LiDAR data penetrates LiDAR. I say that in air quotes for those not looking at me, but it's nice to know if I've got a family farm, you've got one of the kids from a family is going to get married and they're going to take over part of the farm and want to build their own house, that they probably in this case want to build on the western side of this 20-acre parcel versus the western side so they don't get a wet basement. So that's kind of nice. So I've got culverts from LiDAR. I've got closed depressions from LiDAR. That allows me to get into things like flow accumulation, which there is a ton of interest in. Where's water going to go when it falls on the surface of the earth? It doesn't magically end up in a sewer system or under a drainage ditch network. It's going to land on the surface of the earth, collect whatever it's going to run across, and then go somewhere. Really important. Tons of ordinances. They vary from county to county, but a lot of it has to do what are you spreading, where and when, what slope is it. So let's take a look at what we're doing with this. If I go in and I look at a field, I can figure out these are not streams. These are dry networks where water is in theory going to flow. So I can zoom in and look at these lines and say, all right, I've got 22 acres of flow on this little line. And I'm looking at flow accumulation. So how much water is going to collect where? So I've got 22 acres, then I've got 26 acres. I got 27 acres. I've got these two little streams and I've got a berm between two fields. So I got 27 acres and 30 acres. So now I'm up to 59 acres and I can follow these these flow accumulations down. The water in theory is going to flow, and I've got another collection point. So by the time I get to this culvert that we've collected, we've created a topological network with our culverts and our flow accumulation network. So now I know I've got 209 acres running through this culvert. I hit another major drainage channel once I cross that culvert, and I'm following that drainage channel down. I'm following that drainage channel down. I get to my next culvert. And as we're in Ashland and Bayfield counties, we know what happens at a certain point in time. I look and I see there's 1,400 acres plus hitting this one culvert. Is that culvert the right size? Right. It's basically got over 2 square miles draining to that one culvert. If we get a major rain event, this starts to become right sizing of culverts. So very useful, where we've just gone from more of a conservation and planning and zoning data set to where a highway department is going to be very interested in this type of data. Howard referenced it a little bit in the size of the culverts. Is it a concrete culvert? Is it a box culvert? All these types of things. But a lot of that starts with how much water could potentially hit that culvert. Pretty important in that fashion. So I'm going to go back up to that. In order to create that flow accumulation, you've got to start by creating little mini watersheds called catchments. So that's kind of how we're doing that, and figure out what's going to flow from where. We've done that across entire counties, but we've done it not just for major water flow. You can have little minor spills. I might want to know every bit of drainage. So you can do flow accumulation all the way down to 1/10 of an acre is what we're looking at here. We've got 1/10 of an acre, 2/10, 3/10, almost an acre, 2 acres, that kind of thing. But I like this image because we had some wet soil in this area from this aerial imagery. So I turn my blue flow accumulation lines off, and I'm looking at my wet soil. It kind of gives you some empirical evidence that says, hey, this looks right. This is how water should be flowing. And we've ran this against ACPF tools, which NRCS uses for some similar tools. Doesn't do flow accumulation, but it does kind of show where water is going to flow on the surface of the earth. So this is a pretty powerful set of tools. And if I apply this in other ways, let's go look at a farmstead, and I know this happens. You have I can look at it if I'm in a conservation office, make sure drainage in a facility looks right, so I'm not picking up contaminants, getting runoff going through broken down cars or through the cow pasture. You can see my happy little cows down here by the barn, but flow accumulation is going around the field for the cows. But let's say we get a major rain event or a failure. We could have an overflow. We know where the lowest point in the berm of our storage pit here is. If that's the case, I can quickly understand where is that product from our happy little cows going to go. So if I want to try to clean that up, or in the same way, let's say it's an oil spill, I can utilize the same data and get an idea of where and when is this going to start getting into permanent water locations. And I'll look at this location too, because we've got one of those closed depressions right here. How the model should work is there are going to be natural areas where product's going to accumulate. So we've got a tiny little closed depression right here that's going to fill up, and it's not going to go anywhere until that fills up. It's going to have its low point, which is right here, and then it's going to end up down in a permanent water feature, and at that point, you're SOL. So kind of a neat way to look at that. You can also look at your flow as far as slopes go, or even better yet, just create your slopes. Very, very common ordinance for counties and municipalities from a zoning aspect. How steep can something be for a buildable site? Those are typically 0 to 6 degrees, 6 to 12, 12 to 20. If you go out west and you hit some of the bluffs, they have a lot of 20 plus where you're starting to hit your bluffs in Pepin and Trempealeau counties. So a nice product just to have all in your back pocket across your entire jurisdiction. Pretty neat tool. Everybody's favorite is FEMA. And you want to know if you have a citizen that walks in and wants to do pull themselves out of the floodplain. Say they want to construct or they don't want to pay insurance anymore. You can download FEMA data. It's exactly what I did in this. I'm not taking responsibility for the FEMA data. Some people have good maps. Many people are still struggling with their maps. But what you all have is LiDAR data that meets FEMA standards, everybody in the state. So if I were to bring in my FEMA data and create an app, in this case this is a public facing app, I can have my base flood mean levels. I can click on that. I can have my elevation profile come up, and I can compare my FEMA approved LiDAR data against what FEMA says my base flood level is. I hear stories all the time, 30 feet above somebody that's not in the floodplain, but I'm in the floodplain. And that all goes back to maps that has just had error repeated over time until this new LiDAR data makes it into the FEMA space. So this is another thing that can really help your public or not even just public, but private companies that might want to do construction in a location, help them do business in your area. So it's a nice little way to do it. And again, with LiDAR data, it doesn't have to be the base flood mean. You can draw your own line and create your own profile wherever it is, and have an understanding, is this a buildable site? Should it not be a buildable site? Or if FEMA is saying it's not a buildable site, you can utilize this data, and instead of doing a ground survey LOMA, you could do a LiDAR LOMA. Utilize the LiDAR data, submit that with the required NDA/VDA accuracy report to that LiDAR project, which every county should have a copy of. If not, I can probably get it for you. That gets submitted along with your LiDAR LOMA, and it saves that citizen the cost of a land survey. Right. Another great way to utilize your LiDAR data that just directly helps the public. You've got eval models that can be done with the new LiDAR data, and the DNR has run eval. It's their tool set. We've replicated it with them to be able to look at looking at soil vulnerability for erosion. So that whole process has been upgraded in being able to utilize Culvert data and the new LiDAR data. So in this case, you're looking at surface water drainage and slope to try to figure out areas that may have more erosion. So in that case, it's going downhill, more likely for erosion. And then you take the USDA soils, pull those in. Some soils, sand may erode faster than clay. So we understand that, and we get another value that goes to it. We pull in USDA crop rotation. Wheat has a better root structure than corn. So corn is going to erode faster than wheat. This can be used if a county or municipality has their own crop rotation data they collect. That can be plugged into here too, but in this case, USDA has data. And then you create this vulnerability index and figure out where in each HUC 12 is high vulnerability of soil erosion. So I can look across that and say, where do I want to do my outreach to construction or very often agriculture? So we've got a great spot right here where we kind of see this area in red, which has high vulnerability index. This could be a win-win scenario where I'm reaching out to these farmers. We're talking about best farming practices. They save more topsoil, which makes them happy. And let's say we just spent $50,000 reclaiming a stream at the bottom of the hill for the trout. We don't want that filled with all the sediment and soils and nitrates that are going to run off of the farm field. We could also look at things for your transportation offices, which I find are less likely to be using your LiDAR data. So in a case like that, a lot of county highway officials, they're looking at their ditches and they're looking at the crowns of their road. You can create profiles across the entire county focused on county highways, wherever your highway commissioner has jurisdiction over, and say just pre-create all of your profiles across all your county roads and up whatever you got jurisdiction over, so that anybody in your county office can easily navigate their county and have an understanding of how does your ditch network, how does the crown of your road look in the data set. Another common one that we run into is maintaining the ditches. You get two things happening. You have erosion happening that you want to watch out for the sustainability of the road so it doesn't start sloughing, but you also have safety concerns. So my understanding from the highway engineers, and I'm not a highway engineer, is that there's a 3-to-1 ratio that you're looking for your ditches for both the erosion and drainage side of it, but also so that your 16-year-old son that took mom's minivan out, if and when they're driving too fast down the road and they hit a corner and the minivan goes into the farm field, that it just goes into the farm field and doesn't have a rollover event, what you're looking at here. So this is a pretty easy way for, at least from the time that that LiDAR data is taken, to do an analysis of where's our most vulnerable areas for this. So if we're going to do highway projects next summer, this is an area we want to look at our banks. Right. Another great way to really look at our data. And I know I'm a little bit over time. I mentioned the 30 points come up a couple times, but once you start getting into that space, really what you're looking at there is overhead structures, utilities, lines, tops and bottom of poles. You're in a really urban environment. So we actually did this for MMSD, the Milwaukee Municipal Sewer District. They have big projects. They need to look above ground. But I mean, you really start getting into features like 3D cities and the types of things we've all seen Jack present at some of his conferences. So it's pretty neat stuff that you can do with LiDAR data. The sky's the limit. These are just a couple ideas. I regularly meet with counties. The most recent one was you have people with partial ownership that pay in for drainage ditches, and who's ever benefiting from that, whatever amount of your parcels are draining to a ditch network, you pay X amount in taxes. That's really common in Minnesota, and it happens, I believe, in some places in Wisconsin. So essentially what we did for them was around each one of their drainage districts, we created a watershed. And from there, you can calculate how much of a parcel is benefiting by what ratio to that drainage network in order to better calculate their taxes versus just looking at it in an air photo and not really having anything more than that to go by. So LiDAR is a great tool. My third day on the job at AIRS, I had a close friend of mine, very good GISer, called me up, told me, Adam, don't tell anybody this. I'm telling everybody this, but not the person. I reached up onto my cadenza, I plugged in this hard drive. We have LiDAR data. I had no idea. This goes back more than 10 years, but that data set, I look back at the project, it was a $700,000 project. It was sitting on one hard drive in some cubicle in one county. It was just sitting there. The person whose cubicle it was didn't even know they had the LiDAR data. I hate that. I want you to use it. If you have questions, I'm happy to help, but it's incredibly, incredibly useful data. So any questions on any of that? Because I'm trying to go as fast as I could.
That's awesome.
Do you want to see anything again? It's lunchtime. Now,
Since culverts have been mentioned more than once, has the automation of culvert detection come any further since the first acquisition of LiDAR in Wisconsin? Or are we still, or you, Bears, still just running hydro models and looking for pools and thinking, hey, there's probably a culvert there because I've got a pool next to this driveway in suburbia?
great question. The answer is yes. So we run a series of algorithms to try to help us locate culverts. But at the same time, we're also looking for them. I should also say when we're creating these culvert, we've done about 30 countywide culvert inventories in the state of Wisconsin. So there's a bunch, and we run them ditch to ditch because our primary goal is a hydrologic model. So it's not the length of the culvert, But in these cases, you're looking for signatures. And in this app, we're using different tools to create it. But in this app, you can kind of see like where the shadows are. But we are also in a 3D environment, so you can see if you're on a crown of a road, you're not going to have a culvert there. So we're not just everything is a culvert because it kind of looks like there should be. But we're also able to run algorithms to try to give us an idea of where is it likely we're going to have a culvert. And in many cases, that helps us find these random culverts that you'd find out in a farmer's field. Like out here, you might have a culvert, just splitting a dike or something like that. So it helps us find those off the road culverts. When we first started doing these, we just scanned the roads and we'd look and we'd look and we'd look. We use imagery and LiDAR. We've created algorithms over the last several years in order to help us with that process, but it's still very manual. You still want to look at it. You still want to see it in 3D. Missing a culvert is almost as bad, or maybe having a culvert that's not really there is almost worse. It's harder to find in some cases if you've got a culvert there that shouldn't be there, but it's still a very manual process to do it. We've gotten really good at it, but
So those yellow lines there was the person that probably drew that line.
yeah. Yeah, and we have a way to automate it to draw the line. And we can rotate the line and we can rotate the polygon and rotate all the other algorithms to make it draw right. But what we're finding is the software wasn't good enough from the 3D aspect to make sure we're getting to the bottom of the ditch. And we even have code written to get to the bottom of the ditch, but we were still finding little minutia. All you need when you run these models is 1 or 2 pixels that it missed it by on your dam when you're running your hydro-enforced DEM, and that's a digital dam and your water runs around it and it totally misses that the culvert was there. So that human touch really started coming into play, and it's those little tweaks, which is really frustrating, but I spent almost all last year trying to solve that bit, but we're still have a human touches almost every line.
And AI can solve it.
I don't know what to say about AI. It's like they're writing movies now, I have no idea what it can and can't do, but it's certainly, we've played with a lot of machine learning. It's like that.
So, and it's just, in this particular data set, so to speak, what is the vertical accuracy and resolution?
Of which,
The DEM.
so the DEM, would be a 2-point per meter DEM, so it's going to be 0.3 feet, technically USGS specs, 10 centimeter vertical accuracy on a hard surface. USGS, FEMA, everybody considers a hard surface basically a mowed lawn, paved, gravel. Those are your hard surfaces. Your best accuracy testing is actually a nicely tight mowed lawn. You get less spectral reflectance, you get a cleaner data set and no scattering of the LiDAR pulse like you do off of fresh blacktop or concrete. But they're both very accurate, and they have to test out better than that. When we're running these projects, 0.28 feet, 0.21 feet, some of them have tested under 0.2, but it would all be in each one of the county's accuracy reports to be able to see what each county's project tested at. Every county had to be independently tested. So you've got about 40 points per county that got used in the processing of the data called calibration control, which would have a report to its project. And then you'd have an NVA, VVA, independent accuracy report. That's a long one. It could be 120, 180 pages long. And you can literally see all 100 points in trees, in wetlands, on a road, and see photos of the survey setup. And then what's the tested accuracy of that point? And then you get a summary report of how accurate is your data on that county in trees, on hard surface, etc.
Got a couple other questions.
Ask away. I'm here to. People don't know this stuff, and I want them to know this stuff because everybody here has access to this.
The other thing that maybe more, well, maybe or may not be more general, because I'm kind of curious about the correlation between what the standards of markets are through that versus when they use zero.
Okay, so USGS, FEMA, it's all set through ASPRS. Is pretty much who created the new standards, accuracy supports how you test it. So QL3 is 1 point per meter, really close to what was done pre-2015. As we look at QL2, so every county at least has that in Wisconsin. Accuracy, it's 2 point per meter. anywhere from like 2 point to 7 point would technically be a QL2 data set. The vertical accuracy is 0.3 feet hard surface. Gosh, I'm blanking. It's 27 or 19 centimeters on soft surfaces. I'm blanking. I apologize. As you get to QL1, it's 8 point per meter, but exactly the same accuracy standards, exactly the same required survey specifications. When you get to QL0, you're looking at an accuracy that's going beyond the 8 point per meter. Anything over that could be considered QL0, but it's really the accuracy, and that drops to a tenth of a foot on a hard surface. They just have their draft rewritten. That used to be, you had to be, to claim it's QL0, you had to be 3 times more accurate on the ground control than what the required spec was, which basically made QL0 impossible. Meaning you had to level every single control point. So we did Goodhue County in Minnesota, 30 point per meter, the first USGS QL0 project in the country. And we had to level those points, and then that wouldn't do it. I mean, we proved a million times that met the spec, but that project rewrote the specifications because it was so accurate. The survey project was going to cost $800,000 to control the project. Nobody's going to ever do it. But that's been rewritten to 2 times, so you can do it with your more standard survey processes. Way over. Ask questions away. All right, I'll be done. Thanks, everybody.